I'm a roving jack of many a trade, of every trade of all trades, and if you wish to know my name, they call me Jack of all trades. I'm a roving and a sporting blade, they call me Jack of all trades. I always take a great delight in courting pretty fair maids. So when in Dublin I arrive to look for a situation.
Well, good morning. I'm walking out, gonna do some tree identification. Yippee! Part of the bush class, just gonna walk out here and take a couple look at some of the common trees that we have in this area. I think if you're gonna ID trees, you need to pick out trees that are gonna be really, really common in your area. And then once you pick those trees out, for heaven's sake, know how to use them, right? So we're going to start off with a couple of real common ones, and well, I don't know, they're all really common around here in North Idaho, mostly pine, but we'll do an aspen as well. I like mostly pine because basically that's all we got around here is pine everywhere. I'll just show you. I mean, as you can see, just pine, pine, pine. So here we are at our first stop. This is the ponderosa pine. We have two really common species of pine here in this part of Idaho. This being one of the primary ones. You can identify this ponderosa pine. It's very simple. The cones aren't much different, but if you look at the leaf stems or the pine needle themselves, you'll see that a ponderosa pine will have three distinct needles that come off of each of these little stems, and they're all like that. It follows along that same principle the whole tree. On the younger trees you can't really tell, but like over here on this older one, if you look at this one here, the bark has a very orange color, and it's scaly just like any pine, but it has this really pretty orange color. And the older that they get, the better that orange coloring gets on them. Like here's another one here. There's another example of that oranging color that's on there. They're very pretty, and they're very useful. The resin that comes out of these plants, the Indians would use them for gum, for sore throats. Let me see if I can find some resin while I'm talking. They would, here's some. It's not much, but here's a little bit. In any case, they would take this and you could chew it as a gum after soaking it a little bit when it's hard like this. And it's good for a sore throat, supposedly good for helping with decongestion. The tree itself, the resin itself, has antiseptic qualities, so you can actually make a poultice out of it, apply it to wounds, and it'll actually help with the healing process, or so I'm told. I've never really tried that, but that's apparently what the Indians used to use them for. There's tons and tons of uses for the resin and the bark. The bark can actually be used to extract dye, as well as the stems and the roots. Also, I was told that you can actually extract a blue resin from the roots. Again, I'm not really sure. I've never really tried it. These are all fun things that could be tried. But in any case, let's see. Well, resin's good to make fire with, and the inner bark of all pine trees, not just ponderosa, but lodgepole and all the others, that inner bark can be used and dried and ground up and mixed with cereal or mixed with flour, or even you could probably do it by itself, and to make a really crude form of some type of bread. Okay, this is a great example of a lodgepole pine. A lot of people around here call them bull pines. You'll notice that the bark is not as scaly as the ponderosa. It's a little bit more finely patterned, I guess is how you'd describe it. The stems, you can identify these pretty easily. Remember, ponderosa pine has 3 needles. Lodgepole will always have 2, and they're shorter, and you see they're a little bit bushier. Lodgepole will not grow as tall as a ponderosa. Here's an example of a ponderosa here, and that sucker is huge. But then here, this is a lodgepole. That's not an average size, but it's a fairly nice size one. I don't see an example of a ponderosa. Oh, here we go. If you look right there, that big thick trunk right here is a ponderosa. And then if you look, I lost it. Okay, here it is over here. If you look right over here, there is a lodgepole standing right there. Now you see it's tall, but it's thin, and they grow really thin, really tall, and they grow really fast. They've really kind of taken over here in this area, and you can see there's just dog hair forest over there full of lodgepole pine. They grow just like weeds around here. But basically the same as ponderosa pine, a lot of the same uses, just not as effective. These were not really used medicinally a lot, although I imagine the resin can be used just basically the same as any other type of pine resin. You make pitch out of it, or you can make you could chew this as a gum, or make an antiseptic poultice. I don't know that the antiseptic qualities of this are any worse or any better than ponderosa. I just know that basically all pine trees can be used the same way. Inner bark, same thing. I do know that this pine resin here, if you have sensitive skin, it can potentially cause dermatitis. And so, you got to be careful when you're handling this stuff. It's pretty volatile, but you see I can work it with my hand here, and it gets pretty soft pretty quick, and I can take that and I can chew it, and it's actually pretty good chewing gum. We used to do that when I was a kid all the time. Okay, this is an example of a Douglas fir. This is in the pine family. It's also an evergreen. All the ones that I've shown you so far are evergreen. We only have one pine tree here that's deciduous, and that's the tamarack. And I don't see any examples of tamarack around here, but a lot of people really like those for firewood. Anyways, this is a Douglas fir. There is a difference between a Doug fir and a grand fir. This is a Doug fir, and you can tell because the needles are radial all the way around the stem. A grand fir is flat. They can be deceiving because a grand fir, people say you can see silver on the bottom, but oftentimes, even on a Doug, you can see silver on the bottom. So the distinguishing characteristic is those radial needles that go all the way around. And then the trunk is scaly, just like any pine, but it's almost got this greenish tint to it, and it's papery. The bark is very papery and long, and you can kind of see they're long strips, and those are pretty useful. This particular plant is very desired for its different uses and things. Mainly, just like all the other pines, all the other pines can be used for pine needle tea. I prefer the Doug fir for pine needle tea. It's just got a little bit of a more woody kind of flavor. But you can do that with any fir, with any pine. You just have to steep it. You can't boil it, because if you boil it, you begin to release the terpenes out of the actual needles, which you don't want to do, because then you have turpentine. You don't want to drink turpentine. In any case, it's pretty much the same. Inner bark, you can eat it. You can actually eat the young buds off of this. Okay, I found a beautiful example of a grand fir here. This is a really pretty, nicely formed tree, very conical in shape, very, very nice. It's like a giant Christmas tree. But this is a grand fir, and you can tell the identifying characteristic of this is the flat needles, and you can see, unlike the Douglas fir, the needles are flattened to a degree on the bottom. And if you lift it up, see, you can see the noticeable green color. Flip it over, and look at that pretty silver color on that. They're very beautiful, very aromatic. They make great tea. Sap and resin all the same with most of the firs or most of the pines. You can also tell in here, look at the bark is a lot smoother. It's not scaly. You know, it produces a great resin that is highly flammable and very, very nice smelling. In fact, on the Douglas fir and the Grand fir, if you tap them, they'll produce a syrup that you can actually use for a sugar substitute, which is really awesome. Because one of the things that you got to think about, especially in the wintertime when you're like gathering food, is that, you know, where am I going to get my vitamins from? Where am I going to get my proteins from? Where am I going to get my starches from? Where am I going to get my sugars from? And this would be a great source of sugar. These sap that come out of these particular pine trees, the Doug fir and the Grand fir. But beautiful plant, a million uses. Great for fire starting. Okay, so here we have a stand of quaking aspen. And there's no leaves on them right now because they're deciduous and it's the dead of winter here, although you wouldn't know it because we have no snow on the ground. But in any case, you can always identify these because they have little tiny little leaves. I guess they're about 1.5 inches in diameter, maybe smaller, maybe a little bit larger. They have fine tooths on them and they're shimmery. And where they get their name from is when the wind blows here, you'll see all the different leaves. They'll shake and they make the whole tree look like it's shimmering. It's very neat. Or quaking or shaking or whatever. That's where they get their name, quaking aspen. But the great thing about this plant, not necessarily as a food source, although they are a good food source for a lot of different things as far as teas and things like that. But that's not what's really great about these. I was told that the Indians used to use the bark. They would actually chew on it, and it would actually ease their headaches when they had headaches or anything like that. And so I got curious about that, and I checked into what was going on with these. And actually, these plants contain two chemicals called populin and salicin, which actually are basically like aspirin. And so the bark on this tree, the leaves, pretty much anything can be either turned into a poultice or infused, or any other various methods of making herbal remedies. You could do that and pull out that populin and the salicin and make a pain reliever, anti-inflammatory, anything like that, which I think is one of the greatest uses of this plant. And this is it right here. And unfortunately doesn't have any pretty leaves on it. I'll have to maybe get some of those and show them to you later, but obviously the leaves are a teller, and in the wintertime it has no leaves, obviously. It's got a very gray, some of them as they get older like this, the bark turns very gray and dense, but when they're young, they have a very white, kind of spotted kind of bark like this. And you can see that it's white, it's got spots, and sometimes they have lines that run through them. You can see right there, and almost looks like lateral lines that go through the bark. Okay, so that was it. That's my 5. We'd probably go on with a few more, but we aren't going to belabor that. But thanks for coming with me, and get out and do something. Don't just sit around and watch TV. Good grief, there's a beautiful world out there to explore, so get out and do it. See ya.